Two Northern California flight school employees are in custody after allegedly trying to deport one of their students to China. An instructor and his assistant are accused of threatening the trainee, who is from Shanghai, at his home Thursday evening.
The pair then returned Friday morning and took the student from his apartment to a nearby airport where they were apprehended by local law enforcement. The student did suffer some minor injuries.
With more insight into how this event unfolded, we're joined now by Avi Selk, who is a reporter for The Washington Post. All right, so Avi, walk us through what happened here. What are the outlines of this alleged plot?
Sure. So you've got a flight school in Northern California. I think it's pronounced IASCO, which by all accounts is a fairly large flight school, and it seems to specialize in training Chinese students in particular to become pilots. So they get student visas, they come over to the United States, they train with American instructors in English, and they go back home to China at the end and become airline pilots in China. So late last week, a very bizarre incident happened where a student was allegedly kidnapped by one of his flight instructors and another employee at the flight school. They allegedly used threats and violence and claimed that the U.S. government needed the student to go back to China, and they were sending the student back to China. The police say that these two employees kidnapped the student, drove him, this 21-year-old Chinese pilot in training, to an airport, and were in the midst of a plan to put him on one plane and another plane and essentially do a illegitimate deportation back to China when the police intervened and rescued him.
Avi, this is such a puzzling story, but the big question, do we know why the pair wanted to deport that student?
We don't know why. The police have not released very much info at all. All we know, this is putting two and two together and a bit of speculation, the student spoke sort of limited English in his interviews with local reporters. He said that he'd actually been grounded a couple months ago because his English wasn't good enough for him to be in a cockpit taking instructions from, English-speaking instructors. I found that last year there was a federal lawsuit filed against the same flight school by a former instructor who was alleging that something like 1 in every 3 of the Chinese students that they take in, dozens and dozens of students, spoke English so poorly that it was unsafe for them to fly. He gave, in this lawsuit, one example of a Chinese student who was basically told the equivalent of turn left and interpreted as turn right and veered into the flight path of another airplane. So the student who was allegedly kidnapped last week, he says he was never really given a reason why these people tried to send him back to China, but he thinks it might have been for the same reason that he was grounded, that his English isn't exactly fluent or perfect.
Well, Avi, what comes next here for the student? Do we know?
He's told the local newspaper in Reading that he's trying to contact a lawyer. There's also been reports that there may be a second student who's contacted reporters and said the same thing happened to him, and that one's trying to contact the Chinese embassy. Obviously, these students are scared. They're in a foreign country. They apparently had visas, and they thought that everything was good. They had their flight school. Then all of a sudden, two higher-ups at the flight school show up at the door and allegedly tell them that they're no longer wanted in the country and have to leave. So it's very uncertain all around.
And for the two employees, what's next?
The two employees were booked into jail last week on, I think, kidnapping charges or forcible detention charges, very serious stuff. We've not been able to contact them or find them. I don't know if they have lawyers, if they're still in jail, if they've been released. We really don't know. And the authorities have been a little bit tight-lipped about what exactly is going on and whether this investigation is going to stop with these two employees or whether there might be more looking at what exactly is going on with this flight school.
Well, more details to come, no doubt. Avi Selk, thanks very much for your time, Avi.
Sure. Thank you.